Welcome to another Biddle on Saturday afternoon. Biddle Europe special edition. Let me see here. Let me make sure that the YouTube is working, because I don't know if it is actually. Can we get a confirmation from chat saying that it's working? I don't see the YouTube working. Hold on. Did I unmute everybody?
No, you muted us all.
Okay.
No, I can't see YouTube working.
Now, your place marker isn't working, but as per last week, there's a new one.
Okay.
So I'm just going to type in chat.
It's running. I can see it.
No idea why this is doing. YouTube is
YouTube's
really
waiting.
messed up. Well, you probably have to go to the channel again and like the live link for the channel and actually see it, because it's not picking up the event that I created, which is the problem. So
Yeah, I've just told everybody in the wrong chat to go to the right chat, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got you now.
all right. So what I'm going to do is give me a minute to put the YouTube chat on the right screen, because I got the wrong one up. But anyway, this week we are trying out, or I should say giving our final thoughts on a 2-week challenge of Endless OS. Last week we had a few people talk about it and say what they liked and say what they didn't like, and hey, let's talk about it again this week. So Zeb, I know you went last week, but this is also the Biddle Europe, so different people watch these shows. So what are your thoughts on Endless OS?
As a project, I think it's absolutely marvelous. The idea of bringing computers to third world countries and or just people who don't have really good internet access, to give them a computer that comes fully laden with everything they could possibly want. I mean, a 17.5 gig ISO has got an awful lot of information on there. So for me, as I say, the concept is great. I understand their design ethos as well of trying to make it look a bit Chromebooky, because it certainly isn't your typical Linux installation. I couldn't find a start menu, so to speak. So unless you know Linux, it can be a little bit confusing trying to find applications and that sort of stuff. The design of it, I'm not a GNOME lover, but aesthetically it looks really, really good. And unfortunately, that's where my review has to end, because when I went to install it on my hard disk, it says, yeah, sure, let me wipe out your whole SSD. And I'm like, no way, Jose, is that going to happen? I've got 6 OSs on this, and I want to just put it on this. No, not going to do it. So I went to VirtualBox, and I was in OpenSUSE using QEMU, and I booted it up, got it installed, really great, went to update it, nothing, won't connect to the update manager at all, or won't connect to the site that it needs to. My internet's working because I can Google and I can Firefox and everything else. So just before we started, I'm on the PEP, so I went to VirtualBox, loaded it up, fired it up, went through all the process, and then had to kill it off because after 45 minutes, it was still sitting there saying formatting the hard disk. So unfortunately, I can't give it an honest review other than I really like the concept. I think it's great.
Well, I'm going to say last week I said I was going to try out Endless because I didn't have time the week before. I think this week has been just as busy as last week, and as bad as it is as the somebody that should be trying it out, I didn't get to try a whole lot of it out this week. I can only go by what I looked at last week in the little time I had with it. I know that there was no menu, but I like the idea, even though it's different, of not having a menu and just being able to start to type on the desktop. That like you find that in like KRunner in KDE, where that was like one of my favorite parts of KDE, where I could just be on the desktop and start typing, and KRunner would automatically pick up that I was typing something and open up, and you could launch applications from it. I think that's a great thing. It's just not what people are used to. And I'll have to echo what you said, Zeb, where I like it as a project because it's for a certain purpose. It's not for your everyday user. It's not for the masses. It's not for the distro hoppers. It's for a specific use case, and it's for a great use case, and that's to get computers in the hands of people who may not have a stable connection, or may be in an area where they can't get other ones. And that is awesome. I love that idea. Robin, how are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you. And this is my first Europe edition live with you.
Welcome.
Watch and listen live, but this is actually my chance to join you live. So, hello, everybody. My experience, I'm using Endless OS with you now as we speak. Took a while to install though, so I definitely mirror you there, Zeb, because I got stuck trying to install it, and I started the install at 2 o'clock this afternoon, and it didn't actually finish installing until 4:15 before I could actually get booted up. I don't know if that's because it froze, because my PC just went to sleep, or the screen just went to sleep. But I found out you can actually see like a text view of actually what's going on as it's trying to do the install. I did the install from Windows though, so because I was trying to partition the drive, so I did a dual boot install, put it that way. So those interested in dual boot for this one, it can dual boot, I will say that, but it's very time consuming. I've already got a Linux build on this machine on another hard drive, but there's also another one as well. So, like you, Zeb, I've got quite a few that I have to try and boot into. But Endless decided to just stick with the Windows partition, which obviously is where I was installing it to begin with. And when it did finally get installed and I managed to get booted up, I lost my main grub screen, so I couldn't actually boot up into any other OS. So I've lost, for example, my chance to actually boot into Endeavour and Manjaro, but that's on the other hard drive. So the grub itself must have been installed on the Windows drive, which is what I would have expected. So when it first booted up, I mean, I will say I have used this OS in the past as an introduction about a year or so ago, but obviously this time round, when I booted up for the first time, I thought, wow, it's changed an awful lot. This is just my personal view. I've got to say, I think this is more for educational use than anything else. I reckon when you boot it up, I did the full 16 gig download and installed it there. There's a heck of a lot on there, and anybody new to Linux wanting to feel for Linux, this has got to be the OS for them, I think. I know a lot of people out there do recommend Ubuntu and Manjaro as a good place to start, but I think this really probably for me is probably the one that I would recommend as an educational OS to start with. There's a lot on there, but I did find myself, sorry, but I'm a bit of a, an anorak with this. The first thing I did was load up the terminal, and I wanted to do a sudo apt update because obviously I knew it was Ubuntu based. I couldn't connect to any repos. I don't know why. Why? You can't even run the sudo apt update. You can't even run the sudo upgrade. You can't even get the super user account to load up to do anything at root. So they've locked that down for starters. That's why I feel this is an OS for beginners rather than anything else. Of course, Anorak being in me, I know what the first thing I do, any OS that I load onto this machine, I do going straight into the terminal and see if there are any updates. I'm not really au fait on the fact that you have to go to the App Center to do your updates, but I do like the fact that it doesn't auto update. So one thing I did spot when I first loaded up was you have 48 updates. Brilliant. So I went to the App Center and I could see them all listed there. Chrome is installed as well as it seems to be the default browser. First thing I did was, I downloaded Firefox.
Don't be sorry. That's just the way it is.
So that was the first browser that got installed. Couldn't find an install for Vivaldi or Opera, so I know that they are Snap-based apps that obviously this OS is not going to like, so I have to find a manual way to do that. Yeah, so Chrome didn't really matter. But when you do fire up Chrome for the first time, you get a very good welcome screen, I've noticed. And it allows you to kind of get started with the OS and just click through to your favorite websites, YouTube, your Facebooks, your WhatsApp, etc. So I feel that this really, in terms of an OS, if you want to introduce children to Linux, I think this is the one. Got to be the one. I would like to see this. I think probably enter into the educational world. I think, particularly for primary schools. I think that would be a good one for them. Because Windows, I don't know. People I speak to nowadays, they always complain about Windows being sluggish, slow. They can't do this, they can't do that. I'm saying it in the office at work as well now. Linux, 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 Linux.
What kind of looks do you get?
Well, I get smiles. Let's put it that way. Oh dear. But yeah, so I've been running this OS all day today. I'm obviously running this Zoom channel on here now without any flaws whatsoever. I've set up my mic and my mixing console here. No problems with drivers, installed straight away. It detected when I put my USB interface in, it was there straight away. So all of the sound and everything you're hearing now, no problems whatsoever. And it's just, I don't know, it's just been a total flawless, apart from the length of time it took to install the OS on this 16 gig download. It's been brilliant, I've got to say. And in terms of the UI, when I loaded up Firefox for the first time, I thought to myself, it looks a bit different somehow. But then the first thing I did, as I always do when I put Firefox on a new build, I go to the customize and I turn that title bar off. That's the first thing I do. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what anybody else thinks about it, but yeah, I just feel that this is right for the educational platform.
Cool. Quick test you can do for when we're off stream: uninstall Chrome.
Oh yes, definitely.
Yeah, and then the next time you boot up, guess what? We'll be back.
Chrome.
Yeah.
It's almost like an immutable desktop. You can't. It appears as if they've made it so you can't damage it. So, I'd love to find a machine that I can install it on, and then try and delete 3/4 of it, reboot, and see what happens.
Well, I think that's a great point that Robin you brought up. That it may be a good option for kids.
Yeah,
that you can't damage it like that.
Well, I did try to break it, and I know you obviously on previous tests have tried to break distros, but apart from the fact that I can't use the terminal to do things, I can't break it. I really can't. And there's one favorite application I use to listen to internet radio, for example. I can't find it. I can't download it. I can install it on other distros. I can't install it on this one. So I'm stuck with G Radio. But
so you can't find the deb of it and install the deb?
No, because there is no deb. It's in Snap.
Oh, it's a Snaps only. Right, okay.
Yep.
So,
Well, thanks very much indeed for that, Robin. That was very interesting. Jill.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on Endless?
Oh boy. So I had the very same experience with installation as Robin did, and I have installed it several times myself since it came out to test it and play with it. And I do like that it has a very easy to use smartphone and Chromebook kind of like interface, and it's actually a very pretty implementation of GNOME. I think it's one of the prettiest out there, actually.
Pop OS is better, but I'm just saying.
Pop OS is best OS. So anyways, and I just wanted to make a comment that I also want an Endless mini computer for my mini computer collection that you see behind me. I've been wanting one of those for a while and had seen them demoed with an Endless at the Southern California Linux Expo. So that was it's been really great to have them at scale.
Did you see the specs for them, Jill, at that that conference?
Yeah, it was well, they had the original one there, which was a Celeron. And then, but they do have a quad core one now that's made by another company. But I didn't get to play with that one. I only played with their old one.
Okay, continue on.
Okay. So I actually, just like Robin, I love about internet in a box distros and computers for using in third world country schools to teach computing. Because the first internet in a box computers and OSs were pioneered by, of course, one laptop per child laptops. And, but we actually used to have many internet in a box distro options and had to create them ourselves. For instance, in 2012 for Kids on Computers, I'm part of the Linux Chicks of Los Angeles. I'm one of the co-coordinators. And we teamed up with Kids on Computers to install everything from Khan Academy and Wiki and education and coding apps that would be used offline for kids in third world countries at schools. So we had several install fests, and one was upgrading laptops and installing an OS on laptops to go to a village in Mexico. And I chose at that time, this is back again, 2012, I chose Antix because it was a very lightweight Debian based distro and MeepUS, back end. But it worked very well on the old Pentium 3 and Pentium 4 laptops that we had to use. So the reason I was bringing that up is I think it's so important to have options like Endless OS just for this reason, to install, have a distro that you can install for third world countries. And it may be an option for kids on computers in the future. And that's, it's very important. And I am very happy we have other options now because it didn't used to.
Sure. It's interesting you should mention the programming aspect of that, actually, because I think it was Steve Mo West, whose son is a very young programmer and has written a couple of programs for the MX Linux team. And he said that the one sort of area that's missing from Endless is any programming apps or any data related.
Yeah.
Have you been able to spot anything? Because apparently there's a whole categories section where you can go off and, like a mini Wikipedia type thing, get information on all sorts, but nothing on programming.
Yeah. And that needs to be,
Addressed.
definitely addressed. Yeah. Because kids on computers, for instance, now they're using Raspberry Pi. They have their own version of Raspbian with Internet in the Box applications for that use. And they use laptops with their own distro they're using now. But back years ago, we didn't have that option, so we had to build one. And what's nice is those computers, even though they're Pentium 3s and 4s are still being used in Mexico at that school. So I was very happy. Yeah. And so this would be, oh gosh, I would love Endless. It may not run on computers that old, but it will run on their newer ones they use. They're using a minimally now dual core machines and higher. So
nice. Very nice. All right. Well, thanks very much indeed, Jill. Eris, are you there, my friend? And what's your thoughts on Endless?
Yes, I used Endless last week. I haven't used it since. I think Endless is very good for what it is. It tries to give you a simplified experience for using the computer. The interface is like as simple as you could possibly make it. I think it's kind of like a kiosk. I like that they include whole books in the distro. They have part of Wikipedia in it. You don't have to have internet access. Also, like I think recipes and other things like that. I think what it's trying to be, I like what it's trying to be, that it's trying to do everything possible for like third world countries and stuff like that. The only thing I have an issue with is the EULA. I don't like how they say that you can't have a class action lawsuit against them. I don't know why you would, but it says that. And also says that you can't have you must submit to having arbitration with them. It's kind of like credit cards now are doing. I don't know why they go that far, because they also include that there's no warranty of any kind, like most distros do, which I think should be good enough. I don't know why they go as far as having the other things. So I wish they would take that out. And other than that, I I think they're doing pretty good.
Very nice. Joe, sir, how are you?
I'm okay. I initially downloaded it the night we announced we were going to look at it, and I did put it in a VM. I did not put it on real hardware. I had every intention to do it this week after listening to everybody last week, because there were some things that piqued my curiosity, especially when you talked about the 16 gig version and all that it has. I agree with Eris and others that mentioned about the EULA. To me, I see something like that, and it's kind of a big turnoff because, again, I wound up on Linux because of issues like that with Windows and forcing their methodology on people and their business models and that kind of thing. And there's, at first look for me, from what I remember of it, even when I had it in the VM, I actually had it run. I think it was Barb or somebody last week said they had issues with it in the VM. I did not really have any issues with it in the VM, from what I remember. I do remember it being very polished looking. And this is not going to be a fair review because, again, I did not put it on real hardware. I get to the point where I get used to doing certain distros, or I load something up in the VM, give it a first look before I put it on real hardware to see if it's something that I really want to try and give it a hard look. And that may not be a fair way to do things, because we're here for challenges to be able to give opinions coming on, whether you're experienced or not. To me, my first impression was thinking it was not new user friendly. But then in listening to everybody when they talk about the 16 gig version, I think if you have kids coming into school, by what this sounds like to me, and their first exposure to something where they're not pre-notioned, if you want to put it that way, or are exposed to some sort of computer background to start out with, or I've mentioned before, like elderly, they always say elderly adapt very well to Linux because, especially if they've never had a computer before, it's very easy for them. So it's kind of like and I've said, forgive the phrase, kind of like the mind of a child. It's innocence. It's not being convoluted from previous experiences. So if that's the case with this, and maybe it is a great option for something in the schools, but to me, when you had to search for a download on the website, and I remember others mentioning that, it was not the easiest thing to find, number one. Number two, if you do have somebody that wants to try this as a new user from a fresh install standpoint and does not know how to do the torrenting and converting to ISO and all that business and loading up, it's going to turn people off. So in one breath, from a new user standpoint, maybe with what it offers, by what I've read, heard from others talking, and the little bit of exposure I did have to it, if you're coming in and it's already sitting there ready to go, it probably wouldn't be a horrible option. But if you've got people that want to try it, to install it, that have not had experience with it, even myself being a somewhat experienced user now for a few years with daily drivers, if I have to struggle to find things like the start menu or things that we're used to, or we always call it the proverbial workflow, or I feel like it's a little bit of a struggle to do things that should be easier, it turns me off, and I'm like Zeb's favorite word, next. I'm on to the next thing with it. So I don't like the idea of the Windows type mentality, and I apologize for keep comparing to Windows, but a lot of this stuff reminds me of it, was Chrome. Okay, we all use Chrome sometimes at some level, it seems like. I'm trying to shy away from it more and more. But when you put something on and then you want to take it off and it reappears, that's not a good thing. You don't want to have things forced on you. That's kind of defeats the purpose of what Linux and the open source movement's about, or whatever, in my feelings or my opinion. So that's just one other thing that I don't like. It's like Candy Crush. You get rid of it, and the next update, and it's there again. So I apologize for not giving it a good fair review, but from impressions from the little bit I had, and again with everybody speaking on it, that's pretty much about all I can say to it in fairness for what I've done. Would I look at the 16 gig version out of curiosity? Sure, but it's got to be something when I've got nothing better to do with my time, and go from there. I think I'd rather spend my time on something a little bit more interesting. And by the way, I still do have Pop OS on the other drive in here. I have Peppermint as my favorite over there, but I will agree, I got away from GNOME, and I still say Pop OS is still probably one of the best as far as GNOME system, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But Endless did a nice job as far as the cleanliness and the flow. It's quick, it's snappy, all that, but I still think that there's things that might be lacking from an installation side of things. So
yeah. Going back to the Google Chrome thing, I mean, I only said that, Robin, because I already knew the answer because someone had tried to do it. But if you think about it, that they're giving this computer to people who don't have access to the internet, who aren't necessarily going to be able to re-download stuff, if they then accidentally download Chrome or delete Chrome, how are they going to get out to the internet, even on their limited? So I think that's why when it reboots, it goes, okay, what mistakes have been made? Let's put it back to how it should be, and let's start again. So if you think of it from that point of view, not from us as Linux people who don't like that, don't want this, don't want that, don't want the other. It's just, and coming from the UK where we're not sort of like litigation excessive, I don't understand the problem with the EULA. So they don't want to be sued. Good luck to them. They're a charitable organisation trying to help everybody. So if they have to put a little...
But Zeb, doesn't that kind of send a message, though, too, that, and I get it, okay, nobody wants to get sued, but with the strong language like that, if somebody does take the time to read it, like has been done here, that could turn, really turn people off or scare them away. Like, what is there something I need to be nervous about? Now, the other side of the coin, for as much as they had the EULA there, what you just said makes a lot of sense, but I think they do kind of a substandard job in explaining the uses of this. That, when you say using it offline without internet availability, that reminds me of, like I said, with my Windows 7 because of my QuickBooks. I keep that offline 99.9% of the time unless I got to go grab a file. But even at that, it's kind of going back to the old school way before internet existed, to be able to just load your system up, load the programs you need, and go and do your job. So from that standpoint, yeah, I will agree with you 100% if that's what their game is. But then they need to do a better explanation of it on their website or wherever to tell people this. So, you're not guessing your way around it. And I think you did a better job actually explaining that than even what they did on their website. So again, not to sound harsh on them, but that's where it gets a little confusing. You need to have good, clean, about pages or whatever it is, or what their job, their mission statement is, I suppose.
I will agree that there's a case to be made for documentation, but for this use case that they're going for, I don't think that even comes to play, because most people that use Endless OS are not going to install it. They're going to be given a machine with it installed, and I just don't know. I know the EULAs are scary to people as far as, I'm looking at a EULA. What do I got to be afraid of? What are they going to do? But I mean, that is a part of the world right now. Yeah. That's just part of everything, and I don't personally see that as a problem. But.
Well, let me ask you this though, Rocco. In fairness, you're right. I guess if you're saying if people aren't going to install it, but you buy a new computer and you got a drive that fails, and now you got to reinstall it. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Most people that get this Endless OS are not going to be installing it. They would have to take it somewhere and have somebody install it.
I would say that the intention of the Endless OS developers is for you to install it, because otherwise, why is the installer just like 3 clicks? I think is their intention for an user to install it themselves.
Yeah, but where they're going to get 16 gigs from in an area that's got no internet access, or the internet access is like ADSL 512K dial-up.
They could get a flash drive.
Well, I would think, Aris, that would more go to the amount of effort that the Endless OS devs put into the thought of making it, to say that if we have to install it sometime, we're going to try to make it as easy as possible. But I don't think that's the goal, to have people install it.
Well, I don't know if that's the goal, but I think that is one use case that they did change the OS for, to develop it for.
Yeah, to make it that much easier. And you're right. I think, again, I read somewhere that, again, they could ship 50 USB keys out to somewhere who's got these computers, and then the users can just, as you say, 3-click install it. But going back to your point, Joe, of downloading the ISO and burning it to a USB, that applies to any Linux operating system. I agree. I think they're crazy in only offering torrents, because immediately people think of torrents. They'll think, "Oh, I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get arrested for using torrents or whatever." Because there's all this hoo-ha of the kids downloading MP3s and all the rest of it. So it'd be nice if a sponsor could come along and say, "Look, here you go. Here's a lump of my server. Put your ISOs on there, and then people can download them in the normal way." Because that will be a hindrance to them.
Did anybody actually try to install the live key actually onto as a full 16 gig onto a USB? Because I did the 2.1 gig.
Yeah, I've got it on mine.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't install it because I wasn't gonna remove everything from my computer.
Because the thing is, you see, it's not 16 gig. When you've downloaded it, it's 17.5.
Yeah.
So you must have a 32 gig.
Yeah, so I downloaded mine onto a 32. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't fit on a 16 gig stick.
I couldn't find my 32 gigabyte. So.
Well, I must admit, I've only got the one. So once that disappears.
All right. Tony, the bearded wonder, sir, how are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. Thank you very much, Rocco. I spoke about this last week on the American edition, but there's just a couple of things that have come up tonight. One of them is about Chrome. Has anyone actually uninstalled Chrome when it's offline and see if it comes back while it's still offline? Because I'm not sure if it would. I think it still needs an internet connection to reinstall it.
Unless it's maybe in some root directory, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I was just wondering if anyone's actually tested that out to see if that would work.
Well, that's what I was going to suggest. It might be in a root directory somewhere just hiding so that it detects when it's been uninstalled and will reinstall
How
it.
sinister.
Well, again, I don't think it's the sinister side of it. I think it's just this thing of wanting somebody to have a fully working computer when they boot it up again.
Yeah.
That was a joke for anybody that didn't take it as a joke.
Yes.
All right, continue on, Tony.
Browsers are available.
Yeah, no. I think most of my thoughts on it, I said last week, had been covered by the time I got to talk about it. But there is one point that came up on the discourse channel, which was around. Oh no, sorry, it wasn't on the disc. It was a video I was watching. One of the participants last week created, and I made a comment on the fact that you can actually, even though there's no menu, you can actually pin apps to the taskbar on the bottom. If you've got an app open and it's open on the taskbar at the bottom, you can right click it and you can say pin to the taskbar. So if you're like me and you like a clean desktop and you want to get rid of as much as possible off the desktop, but you want to be easy access to all your regular applications, that's one way that you can do it. I did find out that things like Mumble are available and stuff like that. So it could, in theory, become a daily driver. But I'm like other people, I like the access to, being sudo or root or whatever. And the fact that that's locked down just does it away for me.
Tony,
don't have any control over.
Can I ask you, did you try unpinning as well? Because we had a lot of pinning stuff, but I couldn't unpin stuff from the taskbar.
I didn't actually, no.
Yeah, it seemed like I had trouble trying to reverse that, so I was just curious.
Well, I've just done that with the Zoom window that I've got open at the moment. I pinned it and unpinned it. It worked fine.
Okay.
Just a quick question. Is anybody like me clicking the Endless OS logo in the top, at the bottom left, thinking it's a start menu?
Yes. Several times, yes.
Because you click it, and it just shows you your open apps. It doesn't actually do anything else. It's not like a home key. Or the first thing I find when I load up any distro is, where's the show desktop icon? Yeah, and of course that annoys me that that's not a start button of some sort.
Anything else you want to add, Tony?
No, I think it's all really been covered. It's a great OS for the market it's aimed at, but it's not my kind of OS for day-to-day use.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks very much indeed. Tony number 2. How was your endless journey this week?
Very short.
Oh, okay.
To be honest, I didn't get a lot of time to play with it. I've been very busy again this week, and I'm likely to be for the next few weeks as I'll be moving next month. But
moving far away, Tony?
About an hour away from where I am, so not that far. But it came on my testing laptop, even though that was meant to be blank. So obviously it runs fine on there. It's meant to run on it, and I've taken it off and I've reinstalled it and played around with it a bit. If you like GNOME, which I do, it's okay. But as other people have said, it is locked down a bit. You're sort of a little bit limited. The Chrome issue doesn't affect me because I use Chrome anyway, because I need to go to sites I need translation, and Firefox doesn't work for that anymore, so I've had to move to Chrome. But I don't think I'd use it as a daily driver. It's just, I see the use point. I see what it's for. The EULA doesn't bother me because I'm an ex-Windows user, so I just accept. I don't bother to read it. If I want to use it, then I got to accept it. So, nobody's come and arrested me yet and locked me up for something I've done because I didn't read a EULA. So, until that happens, I'll be okay. But I haven't got a lot else to say about it, really. It's fine. It works. But my laptop was designed to run it, so that makes it easier.
That's the perfect case for it. Installed already. So there you go. Yeah. Anybody got anything else they want to add to this?
Well, one of the things we didn't mention is that this distro is like Silverblue for Fedora, and it uses that OS tree. So all the updates is like one solid image. Maybe that's why you couldn't uninstall Chrome. I'm not sure if that's the reasoning, but maybe that's the reason that happens.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but I wish we could have gotten one of the developers on here to talk about it and maybe explain some of these things that, we have questions about, because that's always good. Eric, sir.
There you are, Eric.
How are you?
I'm all right. Late. How are you?
Of course you're late. Is that Michael or is that Eric?
Never on time.
Wow.
Easy now. I
Hey.
can leave just as quickly as I came.
Hey,
I'll let you
dude.
off just because it's a European edition.
Eric, you
And
got
we've
anything
Hank
you want to
joined
add?
us as well.
Hank.
When he works out his mic settings, he'll be there in a minute.
All right. Eric, you got anything you want to talk about with Endless?
No. I mean, I think I've done it justice. I mean, I say no, but I'll give the 1 minute, like,
Okay.
just for the European folks. So I tested it in a virtual box. I tested the full downloader, the smaller downloader. And at first I wasn't really thinking about it in the right terms. Just, what would I do with it? And it really came down to that's not what it's. And once I realized that, it made a lot more sense. I still think there's some issues with the UI. I don't like the fact that you can't get between programs easily. But honestly, beyond that, in terms of the purpose it's built for, I think it's perfectly suitable for that. So, I mean, it's an interesting mission that they've undertaken, and it's one that I really think is important. So I really hope that they continue to gain traction and get. Hopefully, this will have exposed more people to it. And but yeah, for me, and where it ended up was I put it on my daughter's laptop as a way to see if like a 7-year-old would appreciate that type of UI, and she even had problems with it as well. So it just, I think they're very close, and if they have this kind of feedback from people, maybe it can help them make those like last mile kind of changes.
I agree. That's why we do this.
Hopefully, yeah.
Hank, did you get your audio working?
I think I do.
There you go.
Everything should be working now.
Awesome.
Originally,
Welcome.
the microphone worked, but I purposefully muted myself, but my audio was not working in the headset. So now that you guys are actually audible for me, it should be a lot better.
That would be better if you could hear us, dude.
That always helps.
Yeah.
So, have you tried Endless OS, Hank?
Not for the challenge, but I have not tried it that long ago. I tried it about 3 months ago. So if it changed between then and now, my opinion might be slightly different. I also tried it a few years ago. I'll start back then. Experience back years ago, disaster. The live disk wrecked my Grub instance. So I've been a little bit hesitant to try this out on real hardware, but I did try it on my laptop back then. And there's one component in this OS on the full gig, like the full image, and I know why it's so large now, that really caught my eye. Have any of you tried out the hackable games?
No.
No.
What Endless has done is they actually set up a game studio to purposely make 3D games for children to learn them how to hack and program.
Nice.
And they ship that on the disk.
Yeah,
So I
noticed that
figured
they had
because
the,
I've noticed.
Sorry, Hanky. I was going to say they have the Unity engine. I think if it's not pre-installed, you can install it, which is I thought that is pretty cool.
Yeah, those games are Unity based, and they are completely built to be unbeatable unless you change parts of the game, and they actively encourage that. I haven't played them enough to really tell you more about the games in depth, but the fact that they went that far to like ship a custom learning experience for children really adds to that learning environment.
That's
And I've
super
never
cool.
seen any other distro go that far for a feature.
Well, again, I think they're, as Eric said, and as I said before, I think they have a good goal and a good use case for it. I think they're on the right track. So yeah, they've put a lot of thought into this. It's not just a fly-by-night distro that somebody just, stashed together. This is something that they've put a lot of thought, a lot of effort into, and I hope they do good things with it. Maybe they'll watch these videos and see the feedback and make some changes, and they'll be even better.
You guys had the debate on the installation a little bit earlier, and I wasn't joined yet. What I think they went for is to set up like a little tiny, we don't really have computer knowledge, but we are appointed the IT department kind of setting. So it needs to be easy enough for those guys to next finish, but it's not designed for everyone to do. And I think that's kind of why it's part quirky, but part very simplified.
Well, that was my point. I don't think it's designed for people to install. They put the thought into it to make it easy, but it's not designed for the user itself to. That was a perfect description of what I was trying to say, but it didn't have the right words. The new IT guy or the guy that's not there. So, yep, agreed. Anything else you want to add, Hank?
Well, the normal desktop environment, I'm not going to go too far into it. It's not my thing. I'm a KDE Plasma guy, and KDE Plasma to tablet interface is just completely different. There is another part of it, like for the region, it's great. For like a child experience, it's very sanitized internet kind of stuff. And for me personally, I then just rather have the real deal where everything is available rather than the articles that they think will be useful.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anybody else want to add anything? Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I tried my little hands up thing to see if you'd catch it. But anyway, one of the things that I think in trying to be fair to these developers too, and I always kind of have, I think, a little certain amount of, I guess, a little bit of guilt if I misinterpret something. Eric said it perfectly now. Is he got on there and he was looking at it one way, and then he realized maybe it was something else, and then you tried it with your 7-year-old. I almost wish there was a way other than maybe looking at, you can't really go to YouTube and look at reviews because everybody's going to have the same opinion like we do. It's going to be an impression thing. I almost wish some of these developers would have maybe a little excerpt video or something on their website. Some of them I know do. They're far and few between. That will kind of explain the gist of what they're thinking with this, so that when we do grab them, it's not just on how we look at it, how we normally would use something. Because I think that's where a lot of this comes from, is what we're used to. Kind of like what I said, when you're trying to get a Windows person over to Linux or whatever, it's that you already have preconceived notions on how things should work. and that's kind of the same, I think, for all of us because we're used to our workflows or how things should work, or we try to be a little open-minded because something's different. But there's expectations, I think, that come along with that that maybe aren't always fair to the developers when if they have different intentions. It would be kind of nice to know that up front. So we look for these things and then try stuff. Because if I get a moment or two of, I'm not going to say frustration, but I feel like I'm struggling with something, and then I try it a couple more times, I tend to want to, hey, is it important enough to follow through, or do I just give up on it? So I want to be fair to them, and it sounds like there's a lot of potential in this, and I think anything that will help education and kids learning and ease of use, and maybe promote the Linux community, and if you want to call it cause or whatever, to kind of get Linux out there more in front of new users and grow, then that's great. And so I just wanted to add that I think, I want to be fair, and I just wish there was some way that we can get maybe these I called it a mission statement before, but basically a premise of what these distros are meant to do beforehand before we grab them, so that we can look at them a little differently too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, they
Yep.
had originally Endless was originally to be shipped with their computers. So, that was their original, goal. That's kind of changing a bit, but that was, when the company first came on the market, they were selling computers with Endless OS on them.
Yeah, it was a Kickstarter, wasn't it? And I
Yeah.
think they had a ridiculous price point of something like $79 and
Yeah.
$99 with a computer and an operating system for the people to use. Yeah.
Mhm.
Tony, first, yeah, go ahead, Tony. Go ahead.
Tony.
Yeah.
Clean shaven. My apologies. Yeah.
Go on, Tony.
Okay, just a point. I noticed that they did an update for Endless OS. It was released today. I don't know if anybody noticed or anybody had a chance to download and see what difference, if any, it made. I didn't, but I did notice it was there.
All right. I didn't have it installed, so I just had the ISO. So
Was that on the website, or did that come through the regular updates?
No, it was on their website.
Oh, okay.
Tony, 2, sir.
Yeah, we've been talking about the case for Endless in developing countries and places where they haven't got access to the internet and things like that. But they do include things like Skype or and things like that. So I can see a use case scenario for it if, say, you've got an elderly relative who wants to keep in touch with relatives other side of the country in America, or in our case, maybe we've got people who've emigrated to Australia and things like that, and we've got family and friends over there. Elderly relatives who don't necessarily aren't very computer literate, but could just click a couple of buttons, get the webcam up, and talk to their family and friends in Australia or whatever. That could be another use case scenario for this particular type of OS.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah.
So on the distro watch, it says Endless OS 3.6.3 was released. Images will be available soon. It's now possible to restrict users' access to web browsers via parental controls. This will prevent the user from running the built-in web browser or any browsers available through the App Center. That's nice, because I actually don't want my daughter to use a web browser at this point. And so, I mean, these types of changes, it kind of tells you that that's their focus. And to your point, Tony, like, I think this would be good as a kiosk type system or a shared system.
Yeah.
Because you can't destroy it. So.
Yep. Any final thoughts?
I would like to eject on the elderly argument, because it's actually something I was thinking about as you said it. This, to me, has a high level of potential as grandma's first operating system, especially if she's in a nursing home where internet's not readily available yet. Like my aunt, for example, was not computer literate and as a result had no internet. Now, she got the internet first and then the computer followed, but if it had been the other way around, she'd just be bored within 5 minutes and have thought, why do I need this? I can't do anything with it. if she's at an age where learning Windows is no longer going to matter for like a career or anything else, and it just has to be simple, everything has to be easily searchable. She doesn't really know what a web browser is. She just wants to type in a recipe and the recipe comes up. This would be the best distribution to start on for such a person, where they just want the information. They have no clue what an application is. For them, it's all the same. And then presenting them with a distro like this, where everything is the same, for better or for worse, and then later maybe getting that internet upgrade so they can get into email and get into the Skype call, I think that would be a valuable path for them. And I think that's in our region of the world where Endless can really come into play.
Yep.
Yeah, really good point.
Yeah, if you're not fighting those, so that was my initial problem, was I was sort of fighting my normal use, where the launcher was one way, and we all have our preferences, but we also all sort of understand the 3 or 4 paradigms that exist, and this is just different enough. I mean, someone said, it's more like a tablet or a smartphone, which makes a lot of sense, right? And so, yeah, in that case, I could definitely see, if you don't have that prejudice, right? You don't have that preconceived notion of what it should be, and you just put someone in front of it. I mean, my daughter, she got it. I mean, she got the point that she would just click something and it would launch. So the intuitive nature, I think, is definitely there. Just some of those small paper cut type things, and I think they could really gain some traction. And if I was in a situation where I had I was setting up a computer for a library, something like that, it might be a good choice.
Yeah.
One thought: if this distro is really unbreakable, it's the perfect one for Rocco.
You have a point there, Tony. I'm just saying. You have a point.
Yeah.
But see, I found the one problem I had was I couldn't install GNOME tweaks, Tony. Maybe that's a good thing. Who knows?
It will stop you breaking it.
All right. Anybody else before we go on? That is our thoughts on the Europe edition of Endless OS. This is the final week of it, so we will be picking a new OS to try out. Not on this show, but on the regular Biddle. Tune in, and we will pick something new. Who knows what it might be? Just saying. Moving on. You guys, I want your opinions on the whole Manjaro thing. So Manjaro this past week announced that they were becoming an actual company so that they could pay developers full time, basically, for maintainers and developers. So what do you guys think about this scenario for a Linux distribution to become a company?
I personally think it was wonderful because they had already taken many of their first steps being a professional project by partnering with SoftMaker of FreeOffice. And, they proved to themselves and everyone around that they were ready. They were ready for this.
Well, that also brought controversy too, is the whole SoftMaker thing. So,
but now they offer either or LibreOffice. Yeah, and I think it was really a smart move of them to partner with to be on the Linux Foundation's community bridge as well as the Open Collective. I think that was really a great place to get financial backing, but still be transparent. So very good.
Aren't they joining up with, is it Blue Systems or something? A very well-known company that supports Linux anyway.
Yeah, very true.
Well, this is what the post says for the new structure and what they'll be able. This decision should enable Manjaro to do. Enable developers to commit full-time to Manjaro and its related projects, interact with other developers in sprints and events around Linux. So that's something that you don't always think about, is getting developers together in the same room to talk. Protect the independence of Manjaro as a community-driven project, as well as protect its brand. Provide faster security updates and a more efficient reaction to the needs of users. And that is one of the things that people complain about Manjaro, is that, they want, the reason people run Arch is to have the latest and greatest, but they hold back on certain updates. So maybe this will allow them to not hold back or as much of a time period that they do. And the last thing it does is provide the means to act as a company on a professional level.
That last one is really important. And I'll tell you what, so they've been around since 2011. They've proven that they have the staying power, and they have run it very well. There've been some issues. Software is software. It is what it is. But if you think about it from a business standpoint, you can't ever build a business or standardize on a platform if that's just some guys or some people somewhere. And that's not to take anything away from a smaller distribution, because some of them are incredibly dedicated and they put out like amazingly high quality software. But the reality is that a business needs to know that there's an entity behind it that is able to sustain itself and to continue to deliver and be there also to support as well. So what I'm curious to see is if Manjaro starts to offer some sort of support package or paid support type of thing, which I think would make perfect sense for them. It could be small scale to start, and even just sort of end user based. But I think with people, I get the sense that there are more people coming in to the Linux world who are willing to want to try different distributions, and I have to think that many of them are going to want to look at, okay, if I use this, what kind of support do I have? Like a community forum's great. They're very responsive, and you get a lot of information there. But there's nothing like being able to call someone or email support someone. So I think the legitimacy aspect of it makes a lot of sense. And also, these guys have worked really hard on this. And I think, from the perspective of free software isn't free. It's free to us if we choose to not donate or anything. But these guys are putting a lot of time and effort into this. And if they can make a business out of it, and this is what they can do with their lives and dedicate themselves to it, I think that's a really fantastic end result of all of their effort.
And I also think as well that if you think about it, they started off as just a couple of guys decided they didn't really like Arch. They wanted to do it their own way. So they created Manjaro. And they've now proved to the world that they have followed it through and have now created a viable company. That should send a message to the business people out there that, hey, maybe this Linux isn't a niche program for geeks in the back door. Maybe we can now start putting laptops and whatever in PC world and the shops that you've got over there in America, so that people can walk into the store and buy a laptop with Linux on it. Because here's a group of guys who started off this as I won't say a hobby, but as their passion, and now they've turned it into a proper business venture. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and there's no other Arch distro in that space. So they are the first.
And I think also another thing to bring up, and I don't mean to rub salt in anyone's wounds, but if you look at something like Antergos, where, the solvency of that really relied on those people that were maintaining it. And even from a financial standpoint, everything was just sort of where it was. And by the changes you mentioned, Rocco, that they outline, the two important changes, and the first one they list, and I think purposely, is the money goes somewhere now, and it's managed and maintained. It means that there is a bank account that we can draw upon, and it will continue to support this. So there is a financial solvency now that wouldn't have been there otherwise. And then they talk about the company part.
To add to that, what you're just talking about, one of the main changes they mention is to transfer donation funds to a nonprofit fiscal host, which will then accept and administer donations on the project's behalf. So this secures the donations and makes their use transparent, which is very key for a lot of people in the Linux world, that they want to see exactly where that money's going. Anybody else?
From a PC builder standpoint too, here's how I was trying to look at things with when I started gearing toward building. I don't build a ton of computers, but what I do build now, I've chosen to build new with either no OS. If somebody wants to put Windows on it, that's up to them. Or I will put Linux on it, but I will not put Windows unless it's a specific family member or a specific use that has to have it. That's an exception to the rule. And it kills me to do that because I'm so used to doing this now. But my thought was, instead of charging for a distro on there, which brings up the cost of the system, where what I do is I basically build a system at whatever the current costs are that I buy them at, because it's like a moving target with PC parts. You know this, Rocco, as well. When you're looking at stuff, you could look today, and even in the afternoon, prices could change. So I sell them for exactly what they would be paying for if they bought them themselves, or if I buy them, doesn't matter. And then I just put a assembly charge. My thought is if somebody wants to buy something with Linux on it and I'm going to donate to that distro maker, I take it out of my assembly charge. I don't add a cost, whether it's 15, 20 bucks or whatever, because obviously if we're not paying for it, that's not fair to them. So to me, I'd rather do it from a donation standpoint out of what I would charge as an assembly fee and take it out of that. And the other beauty of that is now you're looking at a system costing less, because you don't have that operating system cost like you would if you're buying a license for Windows. Now, granted, if you're buying off the shelf, in fairness, Windows, one of the reasons why they're so cheap is because there's all these advertisers with the bloat, as we all know what that goes on there. And then Microsoft gives obviously a mass discount for thousands of licenses or whatever. So it's a fraction of the cost. They may only be 20 bucks for a Windows license at that point. So that's what you're competing against. So to me, the only other way to do this is to turn around and take the money out of my pocket from a donation standpoint. And to me, I think that's a good way of doing that if they want to get something on the shelf. And the other thing too is that I would be curious to see, now that they're a company, is if they do try to get something on the shelves eventually or whatever, are they going to work with NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, these different manufacturers to say, hey, we've tested this with these different types of hardware applications and it'll work, and it's an approved, operating system. And we know technically Linux isn't, so don't call me out on that. But, from a terminology standpoint, that's what everybody's going to know it as. So I guess if you get my point, the point is that's the other thing that I think that Linux kind of suffers a little bit, is because as much as we know that, Dell, yes, they're working with Ubuntu, so there's been testing done on the different hardware. So that's where, as these other ones start making their way, like Manjaro and other distro makers that are going to try to go bigger with this, they need to make sure that they're also working as well with these hardware manufacturers if the goal is to get them on these specific type machines.
They are already offering Manjaro hardware. You can go out and buy a Blade book, which runs a KDE version. So they say that it's been specifically optimized for that particular hardware. So I'm guessing that now they're a company, they can maybe approach a couple of different manufacturers, one with an ARM, one with KDE, one with AMD or whatever, and see how they go from there. But yeah, they've already started down that road of giving you the hardware optimized for Manjaro.
Yeah, and I think AMD would be probably a good choice to start with if you're going to go bigger that way, because AMD's already been very, very supportive of Linux. And I know that there was just a story that came out, and we could talk about it later if you'd like, with Intel actually is put some other support back in for Linux as well through the kernel.
Well, go ahead, Eric.
I was going to say, excuse me, Terry had asked about, didn't they say something about donations going to a nonprofit because then it becomes tax deductible? I don't know if you read that in the...
I did. I didn't see it in the official announcement.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I did. It may be somewhere else. I mean, I'm not saying that that's not true. I just don't see it anywhere in the official announcement.
Okay.
Going back to your point, Eric, you said about Blue. I think you said about Blue Systems.
Myself, yeah.
On July 8th, Philip and Bernhard met together with the CEO of Blue Systems to officially found this business entity. So as a result, Bernhard and Philip will now be able to commit full-time to Manjaro, while Blue Systems will take a role as an advisor. So that's the relationship.
Cool.
Philip and Bernhard are two awesome guys. I mean, I got to talk to them on a Destination Linux episode with Ryan, and they were absolutely down-to-earth, awesome people. So I love the fact that they're doing this, and I wish them the best, because there are so many people that give Manjaro a hard time because it's not pure Arch and it's not, the people that the people that run Arch don't really care for Manjaro because it's not Arch, and the people that don't run Arch don't always want to run a Arch or an Arch based system. So it's like they're kind of stuck in the middle sometimes, and they do a ton of work, and they are the originators, in my opinion, of making Arch easy to install.
Well, they're in the middle, right? So people like to complain about them holding back packages, but in many cases they do that on purpose, right? So if you are on a vanilla Arch system and you have issues with new packages, as does happen, you know, they tend to do a better job of holding back those ones that need a little extra testing. And you can go into their testing repo and run it before you do the upgrade. There's an advantage to the way they approach it, where it's this close to cutting edge, to bleeding edge, right? But they take back just enough of the risk where it's I think more palatable to people who don't want to deal with running the stock system. And I'll tell you, I like Arch. I use it. I'm using it right now, but it takes a lot of time to get it tuned and tweaked and set up, and you got to install the printers and units. Everything is done by hand, and so the use case for something like Manjaro, where you just install it and it is Arch, you have all the packages, you have the AUR, you've got all of that good Arch stuff, but they've given you sort of the bridge to walk across to get there.
Yep.
So yes, is it perfect? No, nothing is.
Nothing is, dude. Nothing.
Can I just say, one of the things that may be a bit that's kind of rocked the community is this isn't a big player in the field like Red Hat or Ubuntu, which set off as companies pretty well from day one. This is a community distribution that's going business. And maybe that's one of the things that's kind of rocked the boat a little bit. It's not that the actual philosophy about what they're doing is wrong. It's just the fact that the community that are built up around the distribution are kind of going, oh, they're not just now accepting donations and just a community distribution. They're now a company.
Well, I definitely think that it will be a fine line for them to walk. Because you are talking about being a business versus being a community. And, the tendency sometimes when this happens is to forget the community. But knowing, or not knowing, because I can't say that I know them personally, but meeting them, talking to them, and everything that I've talked to with other people that personally know them, I don't think either Philip or Bernhard are that type of person that's going to, now that they're a business, forget the community that pretty much started it. I just don't see that happening. So yes, it will be a fine line, but I don't think that anybody has anything to worry about in that respect.
Yeah, and also the thing you've got to remember is this got there because it was a community-driven setup, and donations from the community were being made because they had a voice in the way it moved and went forward. If now they're a company, they decide, okay, yeah, thanks very much. We know best. It's our organization now. We're going to go our route. The community will quickly leave and stop supporting. And I think a lot of, maybe this is just a cynical business side of me, but a lot of them getting this deal is because Blue Systems saw the amount of donations that were coming in and thought, yep, this will be something that will be easy to work with. It won't be a huge onus on us financially because the community is supporting them. So if they stop going the way the community likes and the community stops paying, then things might go slightly less rosy. But like you, Rocco, I wish them all the best. I think it's going to be great for Linux, for the rest of the business world, to see that a niche market can turn into a business.
Yeah, exactly.
For me, I'm actually not that optimistic about the whole thing. And that's because I always notice a pattern in tech companies that right before they enter that next phase of corporatization, like entering the stock market and stuff like that, shenanigans happen. So, for example, Cloudflare wanted to enter the stock market, and certainly a few controversial users were banned off Cloudflare. I see a same pattern here, which I was surprised that you mentioned, Jill, is that right before this happened, they included a proprietary inferior Office suite as the default. And what I'm worried
Inferior
about,
in your opinion,
new trend. that they are going to. That they now have a corporate body that makes that kind of deal easier. That if, for example, Spotify gives them a bit of money, they easily pre-install Spotify on their system, and it just goes down and down and down. I'm afraid because all these other companies are gathered through the corporate market. So they have a server, they have their support contracts, they have a form of income that way. These guys don't have that. So I'm afraid that it's going to end up like Canonical, where it's suddenly Amazon search integration and stuff like that. I hope it's not that. I hope it's just a formalization of what they're doing. But I am worried that it might go into the recent trend of, hey, let's make deals with companies and pre-install their software if we think we can get away with it kind of deal.
Well, to answer your point specifically about this SoftMaker and Amazon, the Canonical thing was obviously years ago where they added the search thing, but it was actually the community and the uproar that caused that they removed whatever they had put in there. And in the same respect as what Zeb was talking about, the community will also stop donating if they start making decisions like that. I don't think it's a necessary thing to be weary of. Yes, it's a thing to be mindful of, to say it could happen that way. But now you mentioned about SoftMaker being a inferior product. That's all subjective in you like maybe LibreOffice, somebody else likes SoftMaker, somebody else likes Microsoft Word, or Microsoft Office. So yes, I agree that it was a controversial decision, but I don't think the decision was bad in the general sense. I think maybe the communication of the decision should have been a little bit better. And I think they also recognized that it should have been a little bit better. But I don't think the decision itself was bad. And I don't think that kind of a scenario where you're adding a certain program is necessarily a bad thing where, oh, well, they're going downhill. Joe, go ahead.
I get the point that's being made about not wanting them to become convoluted, if that's a good word, or to the point of where they're looking at money. I think the way I looked at it was with SoftMaker being put in there, there are still opinions that SoftMaker is closest, which that again, like you said, is a matter of use case.
It's all subjective to your
right.
To your...
The argument is being made that SoftMaker is supposedly more or closest to the compatibility of what the Microsoft 365 file system is. That's what. So to give them the benefit of the doubt, my thought would be is they put that in there, maybe as that option for people was the first thought. Now, to me, I think there's a slight correction. What you said, Rocco, is Canonical didn't really take out the Amazon feature. They just disabled it instead of having it enabled by default.
Right. Yes, you're right. And bad choice of words, but they removed it.
The thing was, when they were doing it, when Canonical was doing it, their thought process was affiliate money. It was just another way of maybe them getting a few extra pennies donated toward them through people's normal activities anyway. So it's kind of like having the donate button on their website. Do you want to donate or not? So this was a way that if people were going to search Amazon anyway, and they could potentially benefit from it a little bit to help the cause and move it. I don't think it was all about just making, millions of dollars, that kind of thing. So maybe I'm being naive with that statement, but I don't think so. I think it's just the benefit of the doubt. So I do get what you're saying. You always worry about the caution with when Canonical or Ubuntu starts getting involved with Microsoft. You always wonder where these things are going to go because we're so protective of what this whole thing is. Basically, I mean, this is the first time in anything that you really have a choice to use what you want, to do with it what you want, that kind of thing. And I think the fear is if it goes into the bigger corporate end of things, is it going to change it then? And then eventually, are we going to wind up losing what we have? I think that's kind of where some of this fear comes from.
But in one sense, I don't think that the Amazon search could be compared to the SoftMaker decision because The Amazon search was a privacy concern
Right.
about data going out, where SoftMaker is more of a proprietary software kind of thing, where there's no privacy. Well, I don't know if there's no privacy concerns, but that's not the major concern. The major concern is it's not open source.
Right. Right. There are two different things. Yeah, I only brought it up. I didn't mean to mold them together. I just brought it up because it was something you said, and so I was trying to make two different separate points. That's all.
But I had a license for SoftMaker years ago on Windows. So I had used SoftMaker for a while. It's a very good Office application that had no problems with any formats that I used. And I can't always say that about LibreOffice. Now, LibreOffice is very good, and it's come a long way over the years. But I go back to, it's all subjective to your opinion on whether SoftMaker is better or worse than another one.
Can I just say that the free Office that they included, that was inferior objectively, because if it wasn't inferior, they wouldn't have gone back and added extra features that the community requested. So the way that they included it, it was objectively inferior, and they didn't include the full version. This was like a limited feature set, and after after all the upload, then they included other features, and now it's debatable now. But I think before, where the ones that they included before, that was subjectively worse than LibreOffice.
That's a good point. That you could make the case it's inferior by not having that feature. And you were talking about the feature of
file save as or something,
saving certain documents as a certain file type. That you're right on that point. Then maybe it is inferior.
It comes down to the corporate world, though, I think, more than anything else, because the average person, majority of people can get by using LibreOffice, I believe. It's when you get into more of the corporate world, it's kind of like the Adobe argument. People that have certain professional level things that need certain features that maybe Adobe has that GIMP doesn't, that's what sets them apart. And I think that's the difference with SoftMaker, is because if it's more applicable to work with something that's not that's a Microsoft product, but yet not being a Microsoft product, I think that's the difference. And you're going to find that more in the corporate world, where somebody has to have specific file uses, and is exactly what you're saying,
Yeah, very true, Joe. Yeah.
Jill, what do you think about it?
Yeah. Well, free Office, actually, I like you, Rocco. I had a license for it a couple of years ago, and it worked very well. It was good for converting some Office files that LibreOffice couldn't do. So I was happy about that.
Yep.
Didn't it used to be called Kingsoft or something as well back in the day?
Yes.
I think
that's
you're
what
right.
I was trying to remember it. Thank you, Seb. I was trying to remember the name.
Hank, did you have any other thoughts on it?
Well, I do want to emphasize the point that free Office, for what it is, it's more of a demo of the full product. I don't think there's much debate that the full version rivals and might even be better than LibreOffice. The problem is it advertised features, and then it was like, oh, but if you want to do this, you have to pay me now.
You have to pay, yeah. That's where there was an
agreed. Totally agreed.
Yes, Hank.
But it's still a full working Office suite. You can do anything in Soft Office that you can in LibreOffice.
Well, back then you could not save as a Microsoft Office compatible document at all. So the argument of it's more compatible was actually invalid. And I think that's what upset a lot of people. The main reason I brought up the point is not because this is going to be the end of Manjaro or it's going to make me stop using it, because I was already annoyed with the packages. So I made that Manjaro ISO that had them out. So for me, it's not going to change much. I'm just wary that they might be able, like, hey, we can make a little bit extra money for a company if we make Yahoo the default search engine now, or if we include this bookmark or this extra feature. And it's something that I've seen Linux Mint do. It's something that I've seen Ubuntu do. And as a Ubuntu refugee who just went to Manjaro, it's like, are we going to start all over again, or is this just a formality? So that's basically why I brought up the point. Not because it's going to be the end of the world, not because it's going to totally make me hate Manjaro, but it does make me doubt, is this a good thing, or is this in the end going to turn up like yet another bloated distro that we all move away from to the next Arch Manjaro fork that doesn't have that in it?
Well, let me get your take on this, Hank. you can also look at it as from the standpoint that they started out putting it in a release candidate to test the waters. So they didn't actually release it to the general population as far as I'm aware of. And it also got the ball rolling for SoftMaker to come together with Manjaro to say, hey, we need these features in, if you want it to be in, we need these features. And SoftMaker then adds those features to the free version, which is absolutely awesome, which is something that benefits everyone in Linux. So maybe the idea of placing, proprietary software in Manjaro system or any other distro, you name them, might not be the greatest idea for everybody. But if it actually gets the ball rolling where we can communicate with these businesses and work together to say, you know what, that's not a perfect scenario, but let's work together on it. And then we end up with a final product that's absolutely great. Isn't that what we all want?
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I'd say so. And Manjaro is a distro that's not been shy of proprietary software. Like, personally, I don't mind them adding proprietary software. The biggest criticism I had of Manjaro is that they have a lot of unnecessary things. Well, unnecessary for a non-Windows user. Like things like web shortcuts like MS Office Online, that kind of sort of stuff that I see most people take out of the distro. So I think they are more prone to go such a route than another distribution. And I think the corporate thing might make them like double down on that approach. And it's a personal flavor thing. It's just something that I've criticized them for in the past. More so because of personal preference than anything else. And I'm just afraid they're going to double down on it after this announcement rather than taking a step in the other direction by limiting their software amount.
You must hate Peppermint then, because we have Microsoft Office SSBs right out of the box. And it's only a shortcut. The shortcut to a website. If you don't like it, delete it. I know where you're coming from. It's the concept. It's the precedent that they're setting. I know exactly where you're coming from, yeah.
Anybody else have anything on it?
Just a quick question. We're all talking about this hoo-ha about having proprietary software installed on our PCs. Isn't Google Chrome proprietary?
And Steam.
Aren't
and Steam.
aren't codecs that we download and install to get videos and all the rest of them working proprietary?
So some of them are kind of a gray area,
yeah,
which is even worse in some ways.
And as somebody pointed out in the chat, and I made a very good point. Mint initially began as Ubuntu with pre-installed proprietary codecs. Nobody moaned back then. They just went, "Oh, thank goodness, my YouTube videos will play now." So there's a bit of a double standard.
I think the difference is that codecs, you just can't get anything working. LibreOffice exists, and you could get a lot of things working the way it is, and that's a big difference for me, at least.
Yeah, good point.
Well, again, that goes back to your level of stance on a certain subject. So your level of stance on open source software or proprietary software is you're okay with installing codecs, but not Office suites, or you'd rather go with an open source free software thing. Other people's might be, we don't want any proprietary software in it. And it just goes back to everybody. Everybody has an individual stance on that, on security, on privacy, everything. So
let's face it, if people could get Adobe working on Linux, they'd use it. And I don't think anybody would gripe about that. You know, working with proprietary software, as long as you're able to use it on Linux, may not necessarily be a bad thing. I mean, I would love to see 100% open source and free of everything, but I don't know that that's a realistic expectation. So I think there's got to be some sort of level of compromise to some extent, because this is all we ever hear about. The argument about Linux is you can't use a lot of the software that you can use on Windows. So if a lot of that stuff started to be supported for Linux, does that mean, you know, you're a, pardon the phrase, traitor because you're using a proprietary program on Linux because that's what works and that's what you want to use? You know,
look, Joe, it comes down to you will have people that say that, but it comes down to you use the best tool for the job.
That's right.
Regardless of what it is. I don't care what it is.
But the point is if you could use that on Linux, nobody's going to really complain about it because it's keeping them on Linux now. At least it gets them off of the Windows or Apple or whatever, to be able to still do this. But at that point, then it's a clear choice that the user has made because that is the tool that works for them, and that's exactly what I was trying to say. So, I think we're pulling at straws. I don't think it's a realistic expectation to think that you're going to run Linux and never run something that's got some proprietary level to it. Just as Zeb said, Chrome. It's a perfect example.
One of the things that I do before I recommend distros to people is I ask them, what do they do on their computer? Do they just browse the internet, check their emails, go on Facebook, do a couple of Skype calls? Just have a 5-minute conversation with them, find out what they do as a day-to-day task, basically, and then you can find the right distro for them and advise them on that. One of the things I've noticed, I mean, I've been using Linux for quite some time now, and in the 2 years that I've really, really been hard at it, a hard user on Linux now, I've totally changed my life. I mean, I have to use Windows at work. I can't get away from that, unfortunately. But one of the things I can do is I can multitask between the platforms. So I can use a Mac to do my video editing and my audio editing. But I can do exactly the same thing using Kden Live or Audacity, for example. But obviously, because of my corporation is stuck within the Office 365 suite, I have to use SharePoint, I have to use OneDrive, I have to do all of that. Now, most of that to me, I can access through a browser. So when I come home in the evenings and I get a text from my boss or something like that that says, "Can you do X, Y, Z?" That's all done in a browser. So I can actually just fire it up on any platform, on my iPad, on my Linux, whatever I can do, I can access it. But when I talk to my family and my friends and and they complain about Windows all the time, I say to them, what is it exactly you do that's causing it to crash like that or slow you down or whatever? Because the way they talk about it, I'm like, doesn't happen in Linux. You can do that in Ubuntu. Oh yeah, you can do that in a Manjaro. This is exactly what I say to people, and they all just laugh at me. But I'm happy to say, I will say, in the 2.5 years that I've been a solid Linux user, the only time I touch Windows is when I have to do something for work. Apart from that, I'm a 100% Linux here. I've noticed changes. I really have, big time. And I've got to say that 2019 into 2020, for me, I think Linux will go very far, I've got to say. And I say good luck to Manjaro for what they're doing. But the only thing that kind of concerns me most about Manjaro doing what they've announced this week, I wonder if they are considering trying to get into the corporate world. So can you use Manjaro to replace Windows in an office environment? I think you could, but you have to make sure you've got the technology and the cloud-based servers and everything else there to help support you on that. I can't exactly see my company rolling out Manjaro on 600 PCs. I can't see that happening, but our hardware will run it because I have a USB key with me that I take into the office. I will fire it up. It does work. And I have spent a whole solid week using Linux on a USB key. It does work, and I can do my job. So, I will keep on recommending. Let's see if they listen to my advice and go and give it a try.
So you get back to us when you've installed Manjaro and all of it.
I'll be next time. Your point, Robin, I've talked about this in the past too. When it comes down to hardware, it's the same thing when you buy a computer. You have to pick specific hardware for your use case.
Yeah.
But the other thing too is I've said in the past, many times if something seems to malfunction on a system, the first thing people want to do is blame the distro, when in fact it could be something with their hardware that isn't talking right. And most don't look that way. Or I've said this also, which many people have not thought about, and I'm saying it for your purposes and others that may not have heard it, others here have, is how many times do you do a BIOS update? I've had them like for the new AMD processors that have come out, they've had them right away. Or a firmware update in your router. There's so many things that can be all part of this that, it doesn't all come down to just the distro's fault.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yes. Very
totally
true,
agree.
Joe.
It's very hard to get a BIOS update for my hardware here, so I'm kind of stuck with what I've got now. But I definitely know when I'm switching between distros that I have issues with the NVIDIA drivers, for example. So I will use Elementary, for example, on a USB key, no problems at all. I don't get screen tearing, nothing. It just runs smoothly. But I put that down to the kernel that they're using, because I think they're still using 4.15 or 4.16 for the Elementary that I use on that disk. But I think probably as I switch distros, the first thing I do is check which kernel we're using. And I think the majority of the issues that I find with any of the distros that I use on various hardwares is the kernel, because obviously a lot of the hardware drivers are built into that kernel. Now, I've noticed that because the machine that I'm on here now, that's a 12-year-old PC. The only thing I've done in the last 12 years is give it a new motherboard. It's still got the same graphics card. I've upped the RAM to 16 gigs. It's running smoothly, and I don't have any issues. I put a couple of new fans in there, new heatsink on the CPU. Brilliant. I have absolutely no trouble at all. But as soon as I boot up, I don't know, a live USB for Netrunner, obviously running KDE, I noticed really the one thing that I note most on my hardware is what desktop environment am I using. So I've noticed with all of the distros that I've been testing on this machine here over the years is that XFCE, it has no problems at all. Runs like a dream, including Peppermint, Zeb. But the one problems that I'm having, Cinnamon, has been a bit cagey, flawed. But the last update they did, brilliant. And I'm looking forward to testing out the GNOME 3.34 when I can get my hands on that one. I'm waiting for Endeavour to pull that one down on the Arch branch there. I think it will just run brilliant. I think probably, so long as the developers and the hardware experts keep on working hard at it and get the kernel right, it'll be brilliant. And everybody will have a flawless experience.
Tony, you've been trying to get in for a while now, mate. Go on.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a point about, from a newbie, relatively newbie in my case, point of view, regarding the proprietary software. When you install a distro, there's that little box you can tick that tells you it's going to install a codecs and all the other proprietary stuff that you need for it to work. If that didn't exist, Linux would be useless to most newbies because half the stuff in it won't work. So I think it's important that, as much as a lot of people would say they only want free and open source, without codecs, for argument's sake, half the stuff isn't going to work. You won't be able to play music or videos. I just wanted to make that point from a newbie standpoint. It's all right. 90% of you guys in here are seasoned Linux users, and I'm relatively new. And it's something that you don't even give a second thought to, probably, but a newbie coming in definitely would.
Yep.
Good point.
Hank, go ahead, dude.
Yeah, there's 2 points I'd like to go in. The proprietary versus non-proprietary debate. I'd like to explain my position on it myself. I'm actually an advocate of having proprietary software on the disk. Things like NVIDIA drivers, proper codecs, browser that might be proprietary, Steam, etc. The one I actually take a problem with is when that starts becoming demos, advertisements, links, and that kind of stuff. So I don't mind proprietary, I do mind trialware. I think there's a distinct difference there. The other one that I'd like to go into, because is the whole Manjaro at an office environment sort of situation. I'm a Windows professional by day. I'm a system administrator, and I mostly deal with end users computing. So I'd figured I might be able to share my thoughts on Linux on such an environment. And the conclusion that I had to come to, doesn't matter which distribution I use, is that it's actually completely unmanageable. I've never seen a solution that allows me to specify user accounts centrally, and they all get their own profile. This is still possible in Linux, but then I cannot assign them network drives. I cannot lock them down. I cannot specify which programs they should have. I cannot remotely update the system or deploy a new program. And I think that's something that Linux should focus on as a whole to break through in the office, because as a system administrator myself, I've never been able to use those tools. From another perspective, Manjaro on a server, because I personally run a few Linux servers, I also wouldn't want to do, because none of the programs that I'd want to run for a long time are officially supported on Manjaro. Which means that if Manjaro gets an update and it breaks compatibility with that software, I have no guarantee that will ever be fixed. Well, if you use a CentOS or Debian or even an Ubuntu, the software maker officially supports that distribution, and that means that you get support in case something breaks on the distro. So that's my of Manjaro on the Office.
Yeah. So what you're saying is they don't support Arch, not necessarily they don't support Manjaro.
Yeah, I do see Manjaro and Arch as separate, but they don't support Arch and they also don't support Manjaro.
No, of course, yeah. But you immediately went on to mention CentOS and Ubuntu and Debian. So I'm thinking, okay, well then it's obviously these guys don't support Arch rather than they just don't support Manjaro. Yeah.
Yeah, but they might support SUSE, or they support usually a few that are really established in the corporate world and nothing else.
Yeah. Yep.
Why do you think that is?
I personally think that is from a lack of interest. And in that point, them becoming a corporation now could open them up to make an official corporate distro, one that's not as rolling, that's a little bit more tested, a little bit longer term. I think it's something SUSE does really well, where they take a snapshot of what they have on their rolling release, and that's then going to be supported for a long time, so that everything that's installed on that base keeps working, rather than, oh, we updated free font and now everything using that free font doesn't work anymore.
So you said they don't support these like non-mainstream distros, and your rationale was they don't care. Is it not that there just aren't enough users of those distros?
Yeah, it's a two-way street, really.
And so
the distro itself is unoptimal for that use case because it updates certain core elements of the system that another distro would not use, which makes it less interesting for.
That's technical details. Like from a business point of view, what they care about is raw numbers. And if there's not enough users of that distro, don't care.
Yes, but to get those numbers, you would need a certain base to build upon. And if that base becomes popular and it starts becoming used more, then you're going to get those support contracts in, and the application developers are going to take notice and they're going to support it. The whole concept of Manjaro as it is, which is relatively close to Arch rolling distro, is less interesting to someone running a server than it is someone running a end-user desktop. If they were to make a slower, more frozen spin-off of Manjaro, that would be interesting enough for people to take notice and at least try it, and then it might become popular enough to eventually get the support. What I'm mostly talking about is for, like, if a software publisher does not already specifically support them, what are the odds it's going to run anyway? That's where it starts for me.
So where it really starts is there aren't enough users to make it worthwhile. Like the developer of that software has a limited amount of resources, and there aren't enough users to make it worthwhile bringing their application to that audience because that audience is too small. So why should they pay developers to bring their application and do whatever packaging is necessary and the ongoing maintenance if there's 1% of 1% running that distro? What's the incentive there? There's no reason why they should do that.
No, there is no incentive. I agree that's a massive problem. But I add on to that let's say they indeed don't do it because they don't have the incentive. What are the odds that if it runs now, it will run in 5 years? And if you have a frozen based distro, an unsupported package that might just work will probably still work, where if you have a more radically changing distro, it might not, because it's not officially supported.
So why don't you just run a supported distro then?
And that's basically what all the corporations do. But you also always have... Yeah, it's a chicken egg kind of scenario.
It is.
They don't support it because there's less users, and there's less users because it's both not supported, but also less optimal.
Yeah.
That's it. How come we keep finding this in Linux? Everywhere we go in Linux, this is what we find. This
Yeah.
whole chicken and egg thing. We're making constant efforts with that though. Like we're making good strides with that. We have never been at a better time in Linux than we are right now. Just saying.
Mm-hmm.
Alan, did you want to weigh in on this whole Manjaro becoming a company?
I think it's fantastic. They were we learned about this a few months ago when we invited Manjaro guys to sprint in was it Montreal? I think it was. Sorry, I travel a lot, so I forget.
It was somewhere in Canada because I saw pictures on Twitter of you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, in a bar somewhere, and we were chatting to them. We were talking about the various options for long-term sustainability of Linux distros, and they were looking at whatever they could do in order to keep Manjaro going, and they were forward thinking about all the different ways in which they could, like, monetize is the wrong word, but do whatever's necessary to keep their distro sustainable. And they have the best interest of the distro at heart, and they want to make sure that it continues to exist and flourish and grow. And I think it's fantastic that someone outside of Manjaro has decided to throw a bag of coins at Manjaro in order to keep them sustainable. I think it's fantastic. It's great. I have no bad words to say about Manjaro continuing to exist and thriving and getting better. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So, Tony, I'm going to get to you in a minute, but Alan, obviously you have a different perspective because of where you work. What advice?
I don't know what you mean.
What advice would you
it's 10
give?
o'clock at night. I'm not at work.
What advice would you give to them going forward?
I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to know what they should do. I think they know their audience better. They already listen to their audience. They know when they make a decision and they announce something and there's kickback from the audience, they know when to roll things back or when to, course correct. And that's something you learn as a Linux distro. You learn that sometimes you do things that you think are better for the distro and your users tell you, absolutely not. That's not what we want. And then users are generally quite vocal in telling you, the direction they think you should be going. And the Manjaro developers are very good at listening to their audience. They're very in tune with what their audience want. So I think that's the right thing. I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to offer them advice. They know what they're doing.
Excellent.
All right, Tony Hughes, sir. I don't think you weighed in on this yet. What do you think about this whole decision?
Well, like I said, I think I did. I came in a little bit, but like I said, I can't see a problem with it. Alan's here from Canonical, but we've got Red Hat. We've, the big corporations that make hardware are going to go with a company because it is a supported distribution. So, like Alan says, if Manjaro can make their distribution more sustainable by turning into a corporate entity, but keeping that community ethos, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that at all.
Nope, I agree. I totally agree. Anybody else want to weigh in on this before we move on?
Nope.
All right. Does anybody have anything they want to talk about? Tony, you had something you wanted to mention.
Yeah, I briefly mentioned it at the start. Someone posted a link to a clip of someone smashing up a computer on the Discord channel earlier on. And while it was really funny, I just felt it was really sad as well that computer could have gone to someone, that was the other side of the digital divide. I got into Linux because I was using Linux to rescue old PCs and help people out that maybe afford a computer at the time. That's 12 years ago now. And I still do that. I don't do it as much as I used to, but I still rescue older hardware and I still make it relevant today for people who maybe couldn't afford to go out and buy a new computer. I recently gave 2 or 3 laptops to a homeless charity for passing on to the guys that they were resettling and helping them get back into their own accommodation. And so much of today's life is based online. Those guys are going to need access to a computer. And yes, I know you can go into the library, you can do it there. But if you look at the benefit system in our country, they require you to have access to a computer for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, virtually. Well, you're not going to get that in a public library. So they need access to a device that can connect to the internet. And I think we can do a lot as a community to help people do that using Linux rather than destroying stuff. Going back to Endless as well, I can note that yes, it could be used as a distribution that maybe we could do this with, but it is only available in 64-bit as far as I can see. But I don't. That's a major issue days, with most of the hardware that we're probably going to be using for that kind of thing. Most of it's 64-bit anyway. If it's 10 years or less old, it's going to be a 64-bit machine. But I just think it's sad that people celebrate wasting good hardware that can be used and passed on to somebody who needs it. I don't know what other people think.
I think you're going to always have those videos because people buy them just to do that. I mean, people buy new phones and new whatever just to break them, and I don't think you're going to stop that from happening. So, let me ask you guys a question. Firefox came out a little while ago, a month or two ago, I don't know, something like that, and talked about premium features. So they just put out a test pilot of a VPN feature. And I guess they revived the test pilot program just to put out this VPN feature. Is this something you guys are going to use?
Well, my first question is it a VPN or is it a proxy? Because it's on a browser. So you've got to get to the browser before you can get to their VPN. So traffic is already being monitored.
Well, it's basically a proxy, I guess, if in that sense, where it's not going to do your whole system, it's going to do just Firefox.
And I think they're jumping on the whole bandwagon, and why not? Because I think this thing came out about 3 years ago, and they shelved it in January, and now have just decided to resurrect it again. But yeah, I think people will jump at it because they think Firefox security. Yeah, we'll have some of that.
Well, I would assume that they're going to end up charging for this. I mean, I don't see how they would be able to offer it free. Like, it's free now to test. I guess it's a beta or whatever it is. But at some point, they're going to end up having to charge for this. And I personally don't think, I mean, I pay for private internet access. I don't think me switching to Firefox VPN is actually going to happen. I definitely feel more safer. And what I couldn't find out in the article was like what service they're actually, I mean, they have to be using some type of VPN service, right?
Or you said they're not going to do it for free, but Cloudflare,
is that what it is?
Yeah.
It's Cloudflare,
yeah. Didn't Vivaldi or Opera offer a free VPN service, and aren't they still offering it?
Yeah,
I think they are still offering it.
It's technically a filter more than an actual.
It's not a full VPN.
So this has got to be the same thing though, because for me, VPN has got to be end to end. From the moment something leaves my computer, it's got to be in that tunnel. Otherwise, it's not a VPN.
Jill, would you use this?
No, we covered it on LWW, and we came to the conclusion it was going to cost more a month than it would be to get like private internet access or one of the others. So probably not, but I can see for new users, who really, that Firefox is doing so well with implementing security and whatnot that I could see new users this would be perfect for.
Right. Well, I assume that they had talked about premium features, and like I said, I assume that there's going to be more added to this. So it's probably going to be a bundle of some kind.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
See where it goes.
I would use it if it was a complete VPN and it had like a specific like 24 hours logs, like private internet access that been cast. I would use it then. But if it's just a browser thing, I wouldn't use it.
Sorry, what was that about logs and private internet access?
I think they only keep it for 24 hours. I think they said, or something like that. Or I think
10 minutes. They literally keep the log of your connection just long enough to make sure it's going to stay up, and then they dump all notifications, because that was the whole point of them going to court and the FBI saying, "Where's your logs?" And they go, "Look, I'm sorry, it's literally 10 seconds after you've created the connection that it's gone. We don't keep logs," and therefore they couldn't track their records. So I would be shocked if private internet access were keeping them for 24 hours.
Well, I'm not sure what it was. I thought it was like less than 24 hours. I wasn't sure.
Let me ask you this: how many here use a VPN?
Mhm.
Very rarely.
Wow.
I'll verbally raise my hand there.
Okay. Thank you, Hank.
Yeah, I'm like Alan like this.
I do, but unfortunately I have a lot of problems with private internet access. I don't know why. Maybe it's
You
my
mean
area.
compatibility problems or what?
Could be my ISP, but I use a different one called Windscribe, and they are, for me it's just a better option. So, but if I'm at a, I have, treatments and appointments and stuff, and I'm using someone else's public Wi-Fi, like I always use a VPN, because, and if you're in a hotel, any of those networks, I mean, yes, your traffic's encrypted, but packet sniffing, like you can break encryption. I mean, not break, but I mean, they can still see where you're going, that kind of thing.
I feel terrible. I mean, I have a VPN in that my employer provides one, and so I can pretend to be in the UK or pretend to be in the US. And it's just a thing in Network Manager, like OpenVPN. I can just like press a button and I'm on a VPN. I almost never use it. The only time I ever use it is if I need to connect to something that's inside the corporate network. I never use it in a coffee shop. I never use it in public Wi-Fi. I'll sit on a train and use public Wi-Fi. I don't feel that paranoid enough. Maybe I should.
Well, I'm doing a lot of server administration and stuff. So I mean, I'm kind of passing credentials and keys and sensitive data. So I mean, for me, it's I'm
publishing software in a store like that. Many thousands of users are using. Maybe I should. I don't know, but it's all SSL. It's all secure.
Cricket.
Yeah,
cricket.
It's down to personal choice, isn't it? How much of a tinfoil hat do you think you want to wear? I mean, there was a time where I would never use a VPN because I was more interested about that extra frames per second coming down than I was the secrecy. But then what really did it for me was when I was in Self, and on my son's phone, Google, because we're the same surname, Google asked my son, did he want to download a local map of where Self was, Charlottesville, in America. Why were they asking him in the UK when it was me in America? Because we've both got the same surname. It's scary stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely something, like everybody has their own line, like I said before, or their own stance on how far they want to be private. But it's definitely something that we should be looking at and be aware of, because it is very, and regardless of whether it's, you could say, well, I don't use Google Chrome or I don't use this or that. It's pretty much anything right now could be used. Is it being used? Nobody knows. That's out for the jury to decide, but it could be used. And that's what the scary part is for me.
Yeah. The cynical side of me also says that why bother? Because if you've been on the internet 10 years, they've got everything they want to know about you anyway. You weren't using VPNs 10 years ago.
Well, so that's the difference between using a VPN for connection security and for privacy. They're two completely different things. And if you're using your ISP's DNS servers, they know everywhere you're going, regardless of they can't see the data because it is encrypted, but they know everywhere you're going. And if you care about that, then you can use a different DNS provider. But people who use a VPN thinking that somehow is like you're anonymous, right? You're just like, poof, you're off. No, it doesn't work that way. There's a connection. There's always a way, even if they're not keeping logs. It is not a bulletproof set of security tools. If you need something like that, then use Tor. If you're doing something that sensitive. for me, it just comes down to, and I'm not much of a tinfoil hat. I use Google. I like Google's products. I don't care. They know everything about me and have for 20 years. You know, it doesn't bother me because to me, it's all pretty harmless because they're trying to sell me stuff, and it just doesn't bug me. So I know people will vehemently disagree with me on that, and I don't care. So to me, it's about, I want to know that the connection from my computer to some secure place that I have vetted and think is secure, at least, can get that data through that pipe in a secure way. And when you're on public Wi-Fi, you have no idea who is on that network.
Well, the last thing I'll say about it is, yes, when you're out on the internet, you are open, but the argument could be made to make it as difficult as possible for them to be able to track you. So yes, they're tracking you. Yes, they have your information on certain things, but you have to do some type of pushback so that it's not just freely gone. Otherwise, you get down the wrong road.
Yeah. And I'm just remembering it was Proton VPN for $10 a month in Firefox.
Yeah,
that was it. Yeah. And so, but they are going to be offering limited VPN like what Opera does for free. So that is included now. And they do have the password protection now. So that's free.
Well, we're a little bit over time, but I do want to get this question in. Antonio in chat says, which foreign countries are using one of the Linux distros? So are there foreign countries? And I'm assuming he's talking government-wise. I'm not sure exactly. But does anybody know if there are countries using Linux?
Everyone uses Linux for all their servers.
Yeah, I think he's more talking about desktop. Everybody uses servers.
There's been many news articles where like Munich went Linux, and then 3 years later they went back to Windows, and then some other place in some other country went Linux for a couple of years, and then went back to Windows. So, but whether or not there's a whole country's political government using Linux, no idea. And would they really tell us? Because if they all told us they were using Ubuntu, everybody would know the vectors to which to attack them and find out information. So they're going to keep that information secure, surely.
Yeah, that Ubuntu is so not secure.
No. It's not. If they were using Arch, then there's a specific way that Arch is built. So therefore, these hackers know how to get into it. If you're using Ubuntu, there's a specific way that Ubuntu is built. So these hackers know how to get into it. Surely, so a government's not going to tell you that. Why are you shaking your head, Alan? Why is that not the
case? He was trying to keep from falling off his chair with Rocco's comment.
I'm disappointed in him.
I love it. He's coming on again. He's certainly not staying up until 1 o'clock now.
I was just going to say, at least he knows that because he's paying attention. Right?
Well, maybe he has to come back now and to refute what I said.
Answer.
Yeah. Because we got to go. Sorry, Alan.
Yeah.
You can't comment.
No. Me and Popey finally crossed paths on a show.
Hello, Jill.
Hello, Popey. Aw.
Just going back to Linux adoption, wasn't there something in the news recently about South Korea taking up Linux in?
Yes, South Korea and France. Another one.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would love to say that we could go on and on and on, but we are over time now. So everybody gets the last word. PZ?
6 p.m. UK time tomorrow evening. Be there or be square for the big announcement.
What big announcement, Zeb? What big announcement are we talking about?
Tune in tomorrow at 6 o'clock and find out.
Are you sure you don't want to tell us now, Zeb?
100%.
Okay. Robin, last word.
I just want to say thank you very much for inviting me on to join you all here on the live show this week. Been most fun and hanging out with you guys. I'm enjoying watching all you guys on YouTube do your thing, so that's definitely more entertaining than watching an episode of Coronation Street. But no, thank you very much for this, and I look forward to joining you again next month. And in the meantime, I don't know about you, but Huawei and Deepin, Force of thought. Yeah. Thanks,
Nice
guys.
to leave that one in there. It was good having you here, Robin.
Yeah.
Jill, last word.
Aw, thank you, Robin, for coming. And I've loved your content for years. So thank you so much. And yeah, like I said, it's so nice to finally, Popey and I, it's like I've been on Jupiter Broadcasting shows, but he was absent. And so it's nice to cross paths with Popey finally, other than at scale, of course.
We have met in person.
Yes. Yes. That was so awesome. But thank you to everyone here. And Zeb, I look forward to the announcement tomorrow. I will be watching. And thank you, Rocco, again for having me on. And I look forward to next month's European edition.
It's always awesome having you here, Jill.
Oh, thank you.
Eris, last word.
Thank you very much for the stream. I don't run a VPN, but I do run Pi-hole with no-track blocklist, and I also run no-script on most things.
Very nice. Joe, last word.
Again, thanks for having these. These are wonderful. It's funny because I was finishing up mowing my lawn as the alarm went off to remind me about the show, and I'm thinking to myself, for whatever reason, this odd thought came to my mind. I thought this is like the American invasion of when the Beatles were the UK invasion of America when they came. And I'm thinking, hopefully they'll take over the street. But it was fun, So I was really looking forward to hopefully getting on here today, just to hang with you guys during the day and see who was here. It's always a blast with the Beatles shows, that. So thanks again, and hopefully see you tonight.
All right. Tony Hughes, sir, last word.
All right. Thank you very much, Rocco, for putting this on again. And for any of you in the UK, 19th of October, don't forget Og Camp. Manchester, if you're there, get there. I'll see Zeb. I know I'll see Alan. But, it'd be lovely to see anyone else who can make it as well.
All right. Tony, sir. This is so confusing. Last word.
I'm very sorry about that. Thanks for the show, Rocco. I love this one as much as the other one, and hopefully I'll still be awake for the other one. And nice to see you, Poppy and Alan. And just to let you know, there's nothing wrong with Ubuntu. I'm using it at the moment, and I really like it. Good to see a different group of people. Good to see some of the people that will be on the one later, and hopefully I'll see you then.
Yay.
Hope to see you there, Tony. Hank, last word.
I wanted to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on the show this time. It's been the first time for me, and I hope it won't be my last one. As for the VPN stuff, I'll quickly add that I mostly use it to keep myself from being DDoSed, or when my IP leaks. I actually have one that allows traffic to come through, so I can host stuff. When I get attacked, I just disconnect it.
There you go. Well, Hank, it was good having you here, and I hope you come back next time. Maybe even join us on the regular biddle if it's not too late for you.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's like midnight for me.
You don't need sleep, dude. Come on.
And the rest, Hank. If it's 1 a.m. if it's 1 a.m. for me, it's got to be 2 a.m. for you, surely.
Probably, but that does mean that everyone in the neighborhood is sleeping.
Yeah.
I'm always there, and it's 2 a.m. for me.
Oh, jeez. All right, Eric, last word.
My internet is not very good right now, so this is probably not coming through. If it is, I apologize if it's garbled. Good to be here.
Crystal clear.
Okay, good to see everybody. What can I say? Highlight of the week, and I get to do it twice this week. Awesome.
Yep. Alan, last word.
I've spent about 3 hours of my Sunday talking to Rocco. Saturday, sorry, talking to Rocco. So that's enough for now.
So what Alan is referring to, he will be highlighted on a future Linux Spotlight episode in the next coming weeks. Not this coming week, but in a future week, he will be highlighted. So
are we going to break the length record, the broadcast length record?
I don't know if we'll break the record, but we're going to hit it pretty close. It was a great conversation.
Yay.
Stop it.
It was. All right. I'd like to take a moment and thank Endless OS and the developers behind it for what they're doing and all the work that they put in, because it is a lot of work, and you can tell that there's thought put into it and effort put into it. So thank you for your efforts. We will give our final thoughts on the regular Biddle as well, and maybe even
Zeb,
get into...
What was that?
Zeb?
What was that, Zeb? Phone.
I was teasing Alan with the E Corporation phone box.
I completely missed it. Sorry. Please feel free to tease again.
But for this week, this is going to do it for us. Let's see here. The next Europe edition will be October 12th. So you can mark it in your calendar if you'd like to be there. Be here and talk to us. You can join us on Zoom. But we will see you later in less than 3 hours. Right?
Yeah.
Until then,
We love you.
long live Linux.
Bye.
Long live Linux.